Okay. All right. It says we're recording, so we'll see, guys. You got everything you need on your end.
I'm good, yeah.
And do I need to do anything when you share your screen, or are you just going
I
to
think it
start
should just let me
automatic?
share it. I mean, I was just going to show the pictures, but
All right, we'll get cracking. All right. Hi there, friends and colleagues. Thank you for being patient with us as we figure out Zoom yet again. Welcome to our Conversations with the Curator March edition. My name is Sarah. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at NCHGS, and I am joined by my colleague Tim Betts, our Curator of Exhibitions. Today we are looking into the life and the work of Norma Colmar, an Easton woman who captured daily and still life in the early 20th century through glass plate photographs. This confuses me every time. So her maiden name is McFall. She married into the Colmar family. So if I say Norma McFall or Norma Colmar or Norma Colmar McFall or Norma McFall Colmar, same person.
Norma.
Norma, lovely Norma. Norma was born in Martins Creek in July of 1863. Certainly a time to be born.
Certainly.
Nothing unusual happening
Yeah.
then.
And this is actually a return to us from Martins Creek in the 1860s
It
when we
is.
talked
Wow.
about the Civil War letters,
Did not
right? So
even
that's
make that
they're
connection.
happening simultaneously at the same time.
They are. What? Gonna say it again. What a small world.
Small world.
The valley is very small. I know we don't think about that. So relatedly, I guess, tell us what Easton was like as Norma was growing up. What did the world look like for her?
Well, it's post-Civil War, right? Like when she's born is the Civil War.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think when Norma, because Norma then moves, her and her family move to the South Side,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Because they're living in Easton.
Mhm.
And so I think it is, I don't think, Easton at the time she's living there as a
Mhm.
young woman,
Mhm.
it's Easton becoming Easton the city as we know,
Okay.
right? So like historically, at the time of the Revolution, the
Mhm.
kind of sentence we're always end up saying, right?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Easton is small,
Mhm.
right? And really is people that are living here are
Mhm.
centered around Center Square.
Mhm.
Some couple blocks out,
Mhm.
not too far. But by the time, certainly by the Civil War, and certainly after the Civil War, she is living in a city, right?
Mhm.
Because it's that post-Civil War building boom
Mhm.
that is absolutely tied to the development of industry in the
Right.
valley,
Right.
right? Trains and the moving of materials and the creation of the steel plants and silk factories and all that, right? So
Many things which come into being because of the Civil War.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's all connected,
Mhm.
right? But the Easton she is living in is, I would say, becoming like modern Easton as we know,
Okay.
like
Okay.
kind of on an upward population trajectory.
So now she grew up in a, I hesitate to say professional family,
Mhm.
but she did not study photography as a profession, like
No,
initially.
no.
Um, what do we know, if we know much of anything, how she became interested in photography?
So
Because
we,
neither of her parents were in the field.
right. So I think, well, she has I have some theories. We don't know for sure,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I think a really good possibility as
Mhm.
to why she gets involved in photography
Mhm.
has somewhat to do with her education and somewhat to
Okay.
do with her social status.
Ah, all right.
So her education, she's a teacher. She goes to music school. She
Mhm.
goes to a conservatory to learn music and becomes a music teacher. She's an organist. So I think as part of that education, there is this appreciation for the arts,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I think because of her social standing,
Mhm.
which is she's her husband, Dr. Colmar, was a
Right,
doctor,
right.
right? So I think they have financial wiggle room, right?
Aha.
Because learning how to do photography and having the equipment to do photography was absolutely becoming more something people had access to,
Mhm.
but it was there's still money that is to go into that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I think it's partly her her social status,
Mhm.
right? And her, I think, an education that would have centered the arts is something that
Mhm.
was important.
Mhm.
And it's all like a conservatory education would be absolutely music based, but I think
Right.
it would also have this appreciation for, other kinds of art making.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm personally, but also in my own work, I'm interested in the role of photography as, especially at this time, like a very social activity.
Absolutely.
Um, because it's not like, you don't just grab your phone and go take pictures. I mean, these are massive cameras. They require effort to move from one place to another. Um, Even as Norma is photographing a still life, for example, of which we
Right.
have many examples, she's still engaging socially with the world around her.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why is that important? Not only for the changes that are happening, like the late 19th, early 20th century, as Norma is participating in this, but also for her as a woman in this very rapidly industrializing world.
Sure. So I think I mean, we know other things about her too. She's
Mhm.
taking part in camera clubs and kind
Mhm.
of this culture of camera making, of
Mhm.
not camera making, of, photo making. But she is also, she's in the DAR, the
Mhm.
George
Oh,
Taylor
okay.
chapter, like right still there in the
Mhm.
corner of the Parsons Taylor house, right? She is in a group known as the New Century Club.
Mhm.
And what those are, right? Like definitely the DAR, and I'm
Mhm.
assuming also the New Century Club,
Mhm.
they are women's social
Mhm.
spaces, right? Where women like Norma
Mhm.
have a social outlet, right?
Mhm.
Have
Mhm.
like the DAR is of course connected to like your Revolutionary War era ancestors and genealogy, but
Mhm.
like the DAR exists and always had existed as a social group, right? Like
Mhm.
it's people getting together with a common interest. There's speakers, there's events, right?
Mhm.
That of course existed also for men. Like there were
Mhm.
spaces for men like that as well. Fraternal organizations, the Masons, the Elks, the Moose, the fire companies.
Mhm.
Um, but I think she is taking part in all of these as these, especially like photography, as a thing to learn to do something, but
Mhm.
also as a being among a group of like-minded people
Mhm.
that are doing something, right? So I think it's like a social thing you can do together. It's definitely this kind of shared, you know, culture of making is like
Mhm.
the kind of, I don't know, but it is that social element is part of it too. And I think it
Mhm.
gives her a community.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm actually gonna try to move the owl a little bit closer to you for volume.
Oh, sure. You to ask it if it's okay. Okay, is that better?
I think so.
Okay,
Oh, I'm not used to the camera moving. Now the camera has to readjust to me.
just don't look at that.
Just don't look at the owl.
Yeah,
All right. So let's get into like the bulk of what I imagine we're going to talk about today. So when Norma died in 1925, her negatives were donated to the society by her daughter Rita.
sure,
Um, what does it mean to exhibit and conserve items like a glass plate?
sure. So a glass plate, why don't I have gloves and I have a glass plate. This is not one of Norma's glass plates. This
Okay.
is someone else's glass plate. And partly why I'm not this is a glass plate that's not like formally in the collection,
Oh,
I'll say.
okay.
So here's the glass plate. Here, maybe I can
There you
make
go.
Al sees that.
Yeah, that's great.
And then it's literally a piece of glass,
Mhm.
right? The photography process that I don't know, can you see the image on
Very
here?
vaguely, the
Very
light is
vaguely.
shining right down on the plate.
Yeah, it's a, does that do anything?
No.
but
It just looks like dark glass on my end.
yeah, it's an image. Um, and what it is, it's a negative, for those kind of following at home. Negative the same way, if you were taking photos on a camera and you took the negatives to like Kmart to get developed, right? Uh, it's a negative, but it's on a sheet of glass.
Mhm.
This is glass. That would function the same way as film negatives do,
Okay.
which is to say it's the image and then you print that, right?
Aha. Okay.
So maybe I should do like Tim, art historian Tim, kind of briefly explains how this
Let
works.
art historian Tim out.
So photography is the word photography. Well, photography is photography,
Mhm.
is photo meaning light,
Mhm.
graphy meaning drawing.
Okay.
Photography
Okay.
is a light drawing. Where photography comes from is photography had a long history before the camera was invented and popularized by Daguerre in the 1830s. Photography was actually a parlor trick before that. It was known as the camera obscura. And how the camera obscura worked, it's you had a dark room, to be totally dark, camera reading room.
Okay.
Camera meaning room, obscura meaning dark.
Gotcha.
Right. So you have a dark room, and imagine outside of that room, it's bright lit,
Okay.
like the middle of the day. You take a pin and you poke a hole in the side of the room, let's say where a window is, and you let a little bit of light in. The way light will work as both ray and wave, right, is that the light from the outside world shines through that pinhole. As it goes through that pinhole, it flips and reverses, and it actually projects on the back wall. So that was a parlor trick people used to do.
Okay.
It's actually also very similar to how the human eye works. The eye functions as a camera obscura, right?
Okay.
When your eye opens and closes, that's the same as that aperture opening and closing. A camera like Norma would use, or really a camera, kind of any camera, and then like kind of what we've approximated in our cell phone. A camera is a box, a camera obscura. It has a lens on it. That's the hole in the camera obscura. And when you manipulate that lens, when you turn the lens, you're opening and closing the aperture, which allows light in and out, right? So if it's a darker room, you open that aperture more, you allow more light in. If it's a bright room, you close it more and you let less light in. Same way your eyes work, right? They get bigger, they dilate more when it's dark, close more when it's bright out. So people knew how that worked for a very long time. What the invention of photography was is taking that knowledge of how the camera obscura works and how lenses work, and then you add a photosensitive thing to the back wall of that, right? Because camera obscura, like let's say there's there's a guy standing outside of the room. You're going to see that guy upside down and backwards on the wall. He walks away, the guy goes away. What you do to make a photograph, like what Daguerre does, the Jacques-Louis Montaguer, the French guy who figures it out, but then other kind of pioneers of photography. And then eventually what Norma will do is you take a piece of material that could be tin type, which would be on tin, ambrotype, silver, a wide variety of things. And you make that light sensitive by adding an emulsion to it.
And then it imprints directly on that surface.
It imprints directly onto that surface when it's exposed to light.
Gotcha.
So you would, and what Norma would do, you could buy these, but definitely by the time Norma is doing this, you could buy this pre-done the same way you could buy like film or like a pulp box of, unused Polaroids. Early photography, you do this process yourself. So you'll have a piece of metal or a piece of glass if you're doing glass, and you add an emulsion to that, and that makes it photo light sensitive. Then you put it in a little case, an envelope, something, and then you go out and you take a photo, right? Because if you expose that to light, it's going to start developing. But then you go to you take the photo. And of course, if you're someone like Norma or someone taking a photograph kind of anytime before digital photography or automatic digital photography, you take the photograph and you would have to gauge light, all of the stuff, and that depends on how long you expose that film for. That's why kind of older film, there is, a pause. If someone takes a picture, you can't, it's not a snapshot,
Right.
right? So then you would take that, always being careful not to have it interact with light.
Mhm.
Then you process it, which is to say you take it to a dark room and you do a chemical procedure onto it to stop it being light sensitive.
Mhm.
And then if you have a tintype, you're done, right? Like a tintype is a once and done thing.
Right.
It's the actual thing. If you have a glass plate negative, which is what Norma's doing, you then have the negative, and you're going to take that and put it onto a piece of paper that is light sensitive, and then it prints on that. So that is how Norma would make her photographs, right? That is, like I kind of did the Cliff Note version. Like you're not gonna take a glass plate negative. Like we're not gonna go do it now, right? But that takes some doing, right? Like this is not like taking a photograph today where you
Right.
can just like open up your phone, point the phone at the thing, snap the thing, and you're done, right? This is work. So what does that mean for to finally get to your question, right? Because it's like I'm kind of waving pieces of glass around, right? What that means is this is like the glass plates we have that are Norma's glass plates. They're fragile. A, because they're glass, so it's old glass, which anyone that's like been around old glass, that's like you look at it wrong and something can happen, right? But they're also fragile because of that emulsion that's on them, right? They can smudge. That emulsion can scratch off because it's just really something on the surface of the glass. So like these, and like why I have one here that is kind of like not one of Norma's, right? Is because like the Norma plates have been in our collection since 1925. This is actually the 100th anniversary of them being in our collection.
Didn't even do that.
We didn't even do it on purpose, right? But like the best thing for those Norma glass plates is to never like to have them in storage and to just
never see them again.
Never see them again or bring them out under very controlled circumstances.
Right.
Certainly not this circumstance, right? Which I mean, I was being as careful with that as I think I needed to be, right? But like ultimately, when we're preserving that, like that is the one, like that piece of glass is the thing that was in Norma's camera when she was out there or in someone's room or wherever taking a photograph, right? Then there is a whole other subset of that, which is the plates, and then there's the prints done from the plates. It really functions the same way as like prints of like, if there is a printing plate and then you print like a run of prints, right? So like those are also, part of the collection and part of it, right? So there's like the actual negative and then there's that. But like as an object, they're wonderful because they are like, this won't be a surprise to you and probably won't be a surprise to people that come to this, right? But like I love the tactility of it, right? Because it's like, this piece of glass was in her, like clipped in her camera, right? And she took her camera out, set it up, took a picture. And that's like, that was there.
Is it time for your favorite word?
What?
The aura.
The aura. It has the aura. That's what when the aura was theorized, that's what it was about. Should I show Norma plates?
So like I guess from a technical standpoint, so obviously these are not things that you can just bring out of the collection willy-nilly as you please.
No.
Process wise, I'm not sure what the terminology is. Like, so there's no more danger of that continuing to develop because the process is stopped. But there's still
film,
yeah,
any kind of film, this film, other film
in general,
is very unstable. Especially, I mean, these are okay. This shouldn't be out in the ultraviolet, but that's true of a lot. It's true of a lot of things, like everything in our collection, right?
Fair.
But it degrades because it's ultimately just a chemical thing that's done on it. Absolutely, like film as we would know it, like celluloid film, that degrades really rapidly. And to the point, I mean, there is like we have some in our collection, right, that are like celluloid films or like film reels, right? And like we're preserving them and they're here and they're scanned, which is some of them are scanned, like some people might remember, or if you've been here, the footage we have of the firemen's parade in Easton that was done on, early celluloid film. Uh, that film is like, because of what it is and how old it is starting to fall apart, right? Uh, so it is film itself is very, even in the best intentions, is very unstable. I mean, there's it's true of photography, but especially true of like early film, right? Of like motion picture film. I mean, there's a lot of early motion pictures that are lost in part because they weren't preserved and in part because the film degraded, right? So like for us, it's like the normal glass plates are fine, right? Like they're okay. Like they shouldn't be out, in the light and being waved around and all that. But the best thing for anything that's film is to digitize it because then you can use it, right? You can look at the images and you can enjoy them rather than hurting the actual thing. Because that's like our goal, right? It's a tough balance because you want to what good's having it if you're not showing it or using it or teaching with it or interacting with the public with it. And that has to be weighed with we have to preserve the thing because that's ultimately goal one is preserving the thing.
Right. Right. I mean, it doesn't do you any good to show something if the original is so beyond recognition.
Absolutely.
It doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into
some
the slides. Yeah.
If I can find does that look like my Google Slides?
It does indeed.
Okay. Better that than like my dissertation. Okay. So let me see if there we go. Okay.
There you go.
So the woman on I always have trouble with this. She's on the far left. Can you see my?
Oh, I can. Yep.
Yeah. This is Norma. Right here. So the woman on the left holding the trigger.
Yes.
For the camera. That there is Norma. As according to our records, 3 unidentified other women. But there she is out of the camera. And that gives you kind of an idea of what that camera looks like that has the glass plate in it, right? It is she has a little, the trigger that's going to open her, close her aperture. And it is fundamentally, and you can see that more with the camera kind of closer to her, it's fundamentally a box, right? And that box, that front part, like what's kind of facing us, that's where the lens is with that kind of stereotypical, like the bellows of an old camera, right? And the back of it, which isn't facing us, that would have the
boxy part.
The boxy part that has an opening. So there's a button that you push that opens, and you can take out a glass plate and put another glass plate in.
Do you have to switch the glass plates out in that darkroom, or is it something you can do in?
So depending on the camera, you can do it in the field because some of them have a like the glass plate or the photosensitive thing is put in like a enclosure.
Okay.
And you put it in, it opens and then it closes. Or there's ways you can put like a case in and get it. Because absolutely, like if you're going out in the field with that and you have the glass plate loaded and you don't have a thing to prevent that, you can really only take one picture, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's all sorts of, it all depends on the camera. And this is, of course, like the time Norma's taking photos. This is like the kind of like explosion of cameras being available.
Yeah.
So there was Norma. This is my favorite Norma
I love
photo.
this one so much.
I love this. I'm just going to kind of cycle through them to give people a kind of sense of what she is doing. I love it because I love her subjects vary. There are images of people kind of in their everyday lives. Then there are landscapes. There's a kind of subset of the landscapes that is like factories, or industry, let's say. And then there is portrait. Right. I love this one.
It's so sharp.
It's so sharp. And that that it is so sharp, right? Like I think that does speak to that speaks to her skill.
Mhm.
Because so like two things, art historian Tim here,
Mhm.
again talking about this, right? Two things to note about Norma Colmar's photos.
Mhm.
A, they are technically great.
Mhm.
Like they're well taken photographs. The sharpness of this image, right? We can see like a photographic depth of field, right? Like there is stuff that's in focus, which is to say like the porch, the building,
Mhm.
and the men are in focus.
Mhm.
And then you can see kind of, because that's how camera works, right? You can see how it out of focus is the background,
Right.
which that's normally what you want, right? So it's like farther away there, the trees kind of become out of focus. And that's partly because it's also far away. But so they're very technically well taken photographs, which is to say, Norma knew what she was doing.
Mhm.
But they're also very artistically taken, right? They are she has a very particular eye,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And kind of the short Cliff Note version of that, right? It's like she photographs this man being shaved,
Mhm.
and she photographs it the way an artist would because she is like she's
Right.
because if you were thinking of this as I'm going to go out and photograph this man shaving this man,
Mhm.
you're going to center them in the middle of the composition,
Mhm.
right? You're going to go out, you're going to take a picture, they're going to be in the center, almost documentary,
Mhm.
right? They're not, right? They're to the like the one side of the image, they're lower.
Mhm.
There's like what Norma does compositionally, let's
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
There is like this heavy, not heavy, but there's like it's compositionally weighed low
Mhm.
with the men in the bottom,
Mhm.
like that bottom quadrant. And then above that, it's the building. So
Right.
she creates like that's visual tension, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an imbalance. Uh, that's Norma knows what she is doing artistically. So Norma knows what she is doing technically, and Norma knows what she is doing visually, which is to say, Norma is not just going out and like pointing her camera, opening it, and taking a picture.
Mhm.
Norma is making very purposeful choices
Right.
in where she sets up the camera, how she points it, and how she frames that composition.
Because then this becomes not a still life or a portraiture of one man shaving another man's beard. There's a story
There's a
in the
story.
background,
It's an
right?
image that is very, that's why it's such a good image, because it's a
Right.
compelling image, right? Because it's not documentary.
Right. Were there viewfinders at this point?
Sometimes I don't think her camera seems like it has it. There might be
Okay.
like a thing on the top where she can kind of look through,
Mhm.
but it's really kind of somewhat of a guess. Or she'll
Damn.
have something where she can kind of,
Okay.
approximate it.
To take an image like that and to not be able to like know exactly what you're
Yeah, it's great. She's great.
good for you, Norma.
I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
I like it because there's a dog.
Well, let's be honest
I
here.
think there should be any dogs in historic images pro that. That's like a little guy there. But I really like it because this goes along with the thing you and I always end up saying, which is like, look at these people. They're kind of like crouching in this field. They're like definitely planting, right?
Yeah.
And like the expression on like many of their faces, but especially that woman with the dog and the bonnet is like, Norma, take your picture already, right? Like they're very it's a very human photograph,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
they're very like they're kind of like smirking, right? You
Some,
can
like,
tell they're kind of like
lean-
laughing, right? Like she like that lady with that dog, she is like really like leaning, and she has like she just kind of has this like little like twinkle in her eye, kind of.
I've got stuff to do, Norma.
Yeah. Like well, obviously we have this whole field, Norma. Like take your picture and help, right? It's a great photograph. Freebridge,
Oh yeah.
looking over into Peaburg. So this is shifting from Norma taking photos of people in their environment, let's say, to like the environment itself. It's a great little pic. It's a great picture. And you can see like she's doing interesting stuff with the depth of field here too. Because she's really focusing in on the bridge. Because it's like where she's photographing the bridge, like you can see like each like girder, right? And it's all like it's really in good focus, right? And then look at what she's doing, like over with those people that are standing like now, like where time is. They're kind of
Yeah.
on the right, like they just kind of blur out
Yeah,
because she wants you to look where that bridge is.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
which is great. Here's the bridge from another view. I think this is taken from Peaburg looking north. Um, great.
Ooh,
Yeah.
where is that?
I'm not sure. The record didn't say. I was trying to figure out where. Um, I love it.
It's amazing because you would think like so many images that we know of production or manufacturing are so like raw and gritty.
Mhm.
And this is the opposite of that. It's like, am I dreaming this factory?
I have a theory on this. So
Discuss.
this is an image of a factory where it is unpeopled, let's say.
Mhm.
It's not working. Unpeopled sounds like very, very jargony, right? But there's no one there.
Uh-huh.
I think that's because Norma has like a day job, right? Like Norma's a teacher, Norma's an organist in church. Like this is she's going out on like Sunday afternoon and taking photographs, right? Like
What a great Sunday afternoon.
people aren't working, right?
Yeah.
So she's like going out and
Mhm.
photographing these places.
Mhm.
So I think it's like definitely like when if she was taking this photograph on like Monday morning, I think it's gonna be a very
Yeah.
different photograph, right?
What is the term? I feel like you would know this. When you see an image or you're in a place and the circumstances of being in that place are so different than what you would normally expect, like an empty school hallway.
Oh,
What's the term
I mean,
for
it's like
that?
uncanny, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But
Like it's jarring in a way that you can't really.
there's a word.
Like-
There is a word for it.
I'm blanking. If you guys know, help us out here.
To have a brain.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
one.
this one's hers?
This is her.
Oh.
Yeah. There she is. The elephants on Main Street. Love it so much.
Why not?
And it's like, yeah, we could have a whole thing about like the mistreatment of circus animals in the late 19th and early 20th century because like these elephants weren't treated well,
Right.
i.e., like see
We
Dumbo.
should do an episode on the circus in Easton.
We should do an episode on the circus in Easton, Sarah.
Maybe that will be this year's October conversation
Oh.
of oddities in Easton.
Anyway,
Stay tuned.
yeah, well, see, we're showing people how the sausage gets made here. But this is great. I love this picture so much. And it's raining, right? Because they're like have their little umbrellas.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's so good. She's taking botanical photos too. These are, I think, like documentary of these things, right?
Okay.
Of the different plants. Of course, I could go on a whole thing here about botanical photography, but historically,
Mhm.
and with photography helps this, but historically, art, botanical illustrations and photographs of plant,
Mhm.
eventually, botanical illustrations, and then eventually photographs of
Mhm.
plants were vitally important to cataloging new species of plants. I don't think that's necessarily what Norma's doing here, but I think she's informed by it.
Okay.
So like
Makes sense.
botanical illustration classically worked. So it's like, if you're trying to find new plants, let's say, for example, in Mexico, and you are a, like, for example, weird Spanish naturalist, and you're finding new plants,
Uh-huh.
you could send those plants back to say Spain,
example.
cuttings of them on a boat, but by the time they get there
Yeah.
on like a boat with sails, it's gonna be several months. They're gonna be all kind of sad and shrivelly. But the really best way to transmit that new botanical knowledge was botanical illustration because you have what it looks like, and then you paint them so you know exactly the colors they are.
Mhm.
So it's art functioning as a tool for scientific knowledge because art and science are intrinsically intertwined.
They are indeed.
They are. And like Norma here, she's not documenting new species, right? But she is definitely, like, the way she photographs this is absolutely informed by like botanical illustration, right? Like I think without showing botanical illustration, I think most people in the audience have probably encountered that, right? Like,
And her father's a physician. She
Her
would
father's-
have grown up with that.
exactly. Her father's a physician, her husband's a physician, right? So
Mhm.
she would have been kind of part of that world of these kind of illustrations used for the generation of new knowledge, let's say.
Who's this?
I don't know who this is.
Why don't we know?
I don't know. At least what I was looking at, we didn't have a note, but I love it so much.
She's got a story and I want to know what it is.
Got a story. Look at those plants there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a real nice tree in the background. I gotta
Real
say.
nice. This is real great. It's a real great photo.
Oh, the classic.
The classic, here we are in our puffy sleeves.
That's the choice. I love this
I love this one
picture.
too. Love that horse. And like the boys, you can tell they look like they're up to no good.
Oh yeah.
So I think they're sweeping. I think they're cleaning the street.
This was like 5th in Northampton, I want to say.
That's my hunch too.
So I
Like
feel
right,
like I used this for
I think it's
something.
between 4th and 5th Street as you're
Okay.
going up, like up the hill.
Mhm.
Like nearish the
Mm.
State Theater, maybe, give or take, somewhere around there. But yeah, so I think they're street sweepers. And they have a broom there and a wagon. They're cleaning
Mhm.
up like horse poop from the street, I imagine, right?
Necessary job.
But I love it. So like, I think like what strikes me about her work, right? If we're thinking of her work as like and this is the last slide I have, because we could talk about, we could cycle through a bunch, and I encourage people, because we have them available here on the second floor that you can see. But like what strikes me about her work, outside of it being both technically and artistically very, very good, right, is how you got a lot of photos in this period, like the late 19th, early 20th century, and they're very like kind of stodgy in a way. But these are very like they're very personal, right? Like you can kind of like imagine a world where she like had these guys stop so she could take their photo, and they're like, who's this weird lady?
Ma'am, I'm busy.
Like yeah, like what do you want from me, right? It was like, because they kind of look like okay, like do it, yeah. But like they're very you can see her interacting with her world, right, in a way where she is curious. Like I think this is very, I think there's like a curiosity and kind of like a friendliness to her work, like you know what I mean? So I think like it's like very what's interesting about like thinking about art in that way, right, is that like you can tell from the work that an artist does, of which Norma I'm putting in here, right? You can tell often the work an artist does, you can tell kind of what their general like kind of vibe is,
yeah.
right? And it's like my impression about Norma is I think she'd be fun.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think, yeah.
I think you'd have to be able to do that kind of work, right? Because if you were like a creepy old lady and you went up to some kid was like, "Can I take your picture, kid?" They'd be like,
"You're gonna steal my soul," right? But I think there is this because there's a tenacity to it too. Because what she is doing is it's not. I mean, this is when photography becomes mass available for people, right? But there's a high learning threshold here.
Yeah. That dramatic pause was not right. Intentional there. Sorry. Anything you want to talk about that we haven't addressed yet?
So I think
we've got time for like one more tangent.
Right. So I think what's interesting about Norma, right, and kind of what Norma shows us is trying to, because it's like I had this fully formed a while ago, like a half hour ago, and then it kind of left my brain. Norma is part of a class of people that's starting to develop in the 19th century. Like this is the period of time, in part through photography, right? So like when photography becomes available to the masses, right? And by that I mean like Civil War-ish, right? Photography starts first as this new wonder, and then like everyone has it as quickly translates from scientific instrument, which is really kind of what it had been, to something that companies are making. Like this is the development of like Eastman Kodak and kind of all of these companies that are making cameras and making film. And like as a result, that meant there were more cameras that were documenting, right? So I'm going to come back to the documentation in a second, right? But like there then is a variety of people, right? There are professional photographers that are going to like hang a shingle and have a studio. They're going to be taking those very stodgy photographs that you can imagine, like our 19th century, early 20th century photographs, painted background, maybe in the space. Usually they're going to look grumpy. These are often used for those carte de visite cards, right? That you leave when you're visiting and you're, you know, the person's not there. So there's that realm of professional photography, which of course is news photography, of course is death photography, is the photographing of the deceased. That's a whole thing, whole tangent I'm avoiding right now. Professional photographers, by and large, that's men, right? Who are starting shops and doing that in part because that's what society allows, right? Absolutely, women will have jobs and women will be business owners, but like that kind of meeting new people in those circumstances, right? Because like taking someone's photograph, there is an intimacy to that, right? Where you're like posing for a photograph, even now for like a modern photographer, there is kind of there's an intimacy, right? And they'll like, oh, like fix your hair and like here I'm gonna fix your I ultimately always something needs to be fixed. So many things.
Or even just being like, hey, can you take a picture? I'm trusting you not to drop this phone.
Exactly. There's an intimacy to it.
Yeah.
And that intimacy was allowed for men, right? Because it would be more socially acceptable for a man to be taking a photograph of a man and to be in that intimate space than for a woman to be in a room with a man taking his photograph, right? Like that, and that's of course like women will go get their photographs taken too, but there is a level of intimacy there that would be hard socially for a woman to do. Then there are people that are doing photography as a hobby, right? Camera clubs, people that are learning how to do camera work. And I think Norma starts as that, right? So it's like cameras are readily available. Then as now, people get a camera, you take photos. Some people are good, some people are bad. Do it for a variety of reasons. Norma then becomes a third class of person, which is someone who has a camera and is using it as an artistic tool, right? She's going out and she's taking photographs. And like, I think her work is like, she's taking work and she is doing the work of an artist, right? That's different than taking portraits of people. That is different than you have a camera and you just know how to use it. She is taking photographs as part of like a body of work that she's not necessarily showing, right? That is both classes, but I mean, both, you know, both men and women, but that represents a new opening for who could be an artist, right? So in like the 19th century, as photography's developed, there is, and this continues, this debate, though now I think it's pretty settled now. This debate as to if like photography could be art, right? Like it's mechanical, it's not art, right? People would say. And of course, there's people like, you know, I mean, Norma in part, but like famously like Stieglitz and kind of like photographers of his era who are like, no, photography is art, right? And here's the things we can do with it. So like she is part of this 19th and early 20th century discussion over what is allowable in art. And it's in this case, it's photography. And partly I think why people said it wasn't allowable is because it is in a way democratizing, right? You don't need a artistic training of knowing how to draw and paint and carve marble and do kind of these things, right? Like you have a camera, you know how to use the camera, you take the camera. But Norma shows us there's more to it than that, right? Because Norma is she knows what she's doing when she points that camera, right? There's something else I said I was going to table for a minute. I forget what it was.
You said like three things that we are pointedly not talking about because we don't have time.
Exactly. Which is like, you know, like a dangle, a thing we enjoy. I don't know. Do you have it?
I'm really interested in it because I think about like as someone that I wrote about a while ago who had a photography studio where I think it's where the game gallery just went in, like in that corner
Okay.
on,
On Center Square.
let me Lewis and Clark this for a second. Northeast corner of Center Square.
Yes.
And
By the popcorn shop.
correct, yes. Nope, there it goes. No. So you go to a photography studio, and on the one hand, it is like a very intimate setting because you're trusting someone to take that photo, but it's also very formal. Like, you know, you're getting your photo taken. You gotta look nice for it. But then there's Norma, who's just like photographing people out in the dirt, out in the
It's great.
planting potatoes with their dog.
It's great.
Or like, now you're in my home.
You're in my home now, Norma. Exactly.
But had she not been that kind of person, would she have been invited into those situations? Like,
I
if
don't
people
know.
didn't trust her, could she do that?
I don't know. Well, then that raises another question, and it's a question we don't really know the answer to,
Mhm.
which is what is her relationship to some of these people, right? Like, what is her relationship to the guy being shaved?
Mhm.
What is her relationship to the barber who's doing it, right?
Yeah.
Was her relationship to those people in the field?
Who are these people?
Who are these people, right? So it's like, maybe we do know that and we just don't have that information, right? But like, that is dependent. Like, if those are strangers that she's just walking up to, that's a
Right.
very different interaction than like these are our friends or like cousins or like family
Mhm.
people that we know, and they're indulging me, right? Like,
Right,
there's a
right.
difference there.
Yeah.
The thing you jogged my memory with what I was going to say,
Good.
which is like, now that there is more cameras in the 19th and early 20th century, those cameras are documenting the world,
Mhm.
right? So it's like we spend like an inordinate amount of time these days as we work to 2026, like, what was Easton like in 1776, right? And we like look at little maps, and we like argue about how you and I like argue about how those maps correspond to like the present, right? Not argue too much. We get passionate about these maps. But when they get in the 19th century, you have people taking photos everywhere, right? Famously, when we were talking about the firefighting exhibit, there's the picture on 4th and Northampton of the fancy carriage and like maybe Frank, right? But it's like, but it's like super documented, right? So it's like, you can, like, upstairs in our library, we have like photo files where it's like, here are the photos we have of 4th Street.
Yeah.
Right. And you can kind of like
the Northampton Street was like,
and it's like, let's look at the photographs we have, and you can kind of like piece together what it looks like. You can see as like businesses change, you can see fashion change, you can see as like new bridges go in, as they like redo parts of town, right? Like, you can see like the fountain that was in Center Square go away, and then the monument be put in. So like, while this might be, I'm not sure, like, there's some photos we have are documentary. Like, there's a lot that are there's actually a really interesting mid 20th century series of photographs we have that are like documentary photos of Easton before urban renewal, where they're like going around taking pictures of like blight, right? But a lot of these photos weren't meant to be documentary. Like, it's meant to be like, here are the elephants, right? Or like, here are people on the street, but they're also like an important historical document, because it's like, oh, that's what this street looked like. That's what business was here. That's what, that sign says that's where the haberdasher is, right? So it's like, then they're a photograph, but they're a photograph that is a documentary source, right? Which is really, really cool.
Funny story, being at the front desk, you hear all sorts of stories all the time. And someone asked, who had gone through the museum and asked about the Taylor building, or what is now New York Taylor's, on the north side of 4th and Northampton.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I actually know offhand that was Rosenbaum's Millinery, because the building looks structurally exactly the same as it did when it went up.
And you know that.
And I know that because I looked at the photographs.
Right.
Not even photographs of that building, just like, wow, what a nice street scene. Wow, isn't that building in the background really cool? I wonder what that is. And then you go down the rabbit hole, and then someone asks you about it, and you can answer them.
Exactly.
So back to Norma. Norma is buried in Easton Cemetery. As you go through the main gate, you go up the 7th Street Hill, there's that big stone gate. She is just inside to the right. I'm pointing like this means anything.
Right
this way. So we would be remiss if we did not recognize our friends at the historic Easton Cemetery. They have been open for about 175 years now.
Mhm.
And that's a whole conversation about the evolution of cemeteries, the social aspect of the
Which we
cemetery.
should do someday
We
as well. Two
should.
conversation topics.
Yes.
There's
Thanks, guys.
there's a whole
Belated
interesting
birthday, yeah.
subplot of moving bodies for that one. It's great. But yeah,
Anyway,
the cemetery is beautiful
Yeah.
and it's great to visit. Yeah, you can visit Norma.
you can
And
visit
there's something
Norma
lovely
and
about
also
that.
see other works of art in the cemetery back.
Because it's when cemeteries were meant to be beautiful parks.
Right.
Mhm.
So shout out to our friends up there. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we perhaps did not cover, did not have time to cover?
You can all be ready for the quiz on how glass plate negatives work.
Yes.
It'll be in your inbox immediately.
All right.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask you a quick question? When would this recording be available?
Generally, I like to have them up within 2 weeks of the program date. So I upload them to YouTube and then I make sure that all the captions are accurate and there are no issues with the YouTube checks like on the back end, but generally 2 weeks is like my goal. What I will do is I upload it, I check it, I make sure the subtitles are fine. And then I will post about it to our Facebook and to our Instagram. So everyone will know that it is up and available.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. So thank you to everyone for joining in our conversation today. We finished on time. That's a rarity.
Rarity. We're
for
getting
us.
good at this, Sarah.
Are we? I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, no, this is one of my favorite parts of the month because this
Me
is
too.
like just sit down and talk about what we do.
Time I get to spend with my co-host, Sarah.
Yeah, this is also really cool. I loved starting this series because I feel like it helps you guys also to see what we do behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Right. It makes the museum accessible and fun, and you get to peek in our archive and know like
See how weird we are.
how
Yeah.
how does an exhibit get planned? It's a lot of shenanigans. I'll tell you that.
You'd be amazed.
Yes. So you can help support our programming and help support all of the ways that help us to help you. If you visit sigilmuseum.org/support, there are so many ways that you can help us fulfill our mission, like donating or becoming a member or sponsoring an artifact or a program or even sponsoring this program. All right, so we'll see you in about a month from now. Let me tell you the date. That will be last Wednesday of April, April 30th. We are going to talk about the Warehouse Valley exhibit and the environmental impact of warehouses.
Very Lorax themed.
Someone needs to speak for the Blue Salamanders.
Indeed.
And it will be us.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you in about a month from now. And hopefully by that point, spring will be right and ready for us.
I truly hope so.
And not the snow flurries we had today. Nope.
Nonsense.
Not that. All right. We will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.